Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Q&Ray. Today I'm joined by Christian Fox on the Big Island in Hawaii. How are things?
Good, man. Trying to finish up the year.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
it's been a
We just
crazy.
had the volcano just started erupting again, so we're ending 2020 with a bang.
Nice. Does that affect life on the island when it's erupting like that?
Yeah, we've had clear blue skies for 2 years, and I woke up this morning and it is like LA
Wow.
fog. Just the ocean's kind of just gray, the sky is gray.
Oh dang,
Good
that's
for tourism, not so great for health.
right, right. But it's good for tourism?
Yeah, because people want to come see a live volcano and the lava, and
I see.
all of us that live here are like, "Oh no, not again."
When was the last time that happened? You said 2 years?
Yeah, 2 years ago, it had, like, the big eruption, it was like air quality was as bad as, like, Kathmandu here in Kona,
Oh man.
and,
Okay.
it lasted for, like, 6 or so months. Yeah, it was rough.
That's crazy. Okay. So it's not like super explosive though where everything is like falling on top of things, is it?
No, so it's, like, shooting up, like, 400 feet right now, and then the lava streams will start going down toward the ocean, and
Okay.
so there's not a lot of people that live right near, the
Yeah.
volcano national park.
Interesting.
So it stays like that. Nobody's in danger.
That's cool. Okay. That's interesting. Have you lived there your entire life?
Yeah.
Oh wow, nice.
No,
Okay.
I grew up in Atlanta and lived here for like 20 years.
Oh, okay. That's a good amount of time. Cool.
Yeah.
So, what do you want to talk about today?
Um, I don't know, a couple things I think. One, I was going to ask a real simple question about movement,
Okay.
and then maybe a couple questions, maybe just about even how to get started with your own business, kind of in a fitness, nutrition, wellness
Cool.
idea.
Okay.
So I know it's kind of different everywhere, but I'd love to hear some thoughts about it.
For sure. Yeah. All
Right. Cool. So I'll try to get some better lighting next time as well. I'm looking
right.
pretty dark.
I
Sorry,
have
everyone.
these fancy lights, so I can match you if you want.
I don't know. I think they'd rather see your face. Um, no, I was having a discussion the other day with someone. We were doing some deadlifts, and we have a real tall guy, probably 6'2", really long legs. And this other person was all like, "Get your hips down, get your hips down, get your hips down." And I was like, I think he's okay. Like,
Yeah.
based on body proportions, like his hips are super high, but he's not, just straight leg, weird bent over. And so I was talking to them about like, hey, you got to pay attention to people's body proportions. Some people have higher hips, some will be a little bit lower. You have the perfect like 45-degree angle on some people. Um, but we were kind of talking about that, and they just never believed me that you could have different positions. Good, still solid, proper would be considered an okay deadlift position for different body types. That it's not just the perfect 45-degree angle setup for everyone.
Yes.
Give me your some thoughts on that, and then I can go be like, "Hey, I had a professional." No,
When this goes live on YouTube, you can share the link with them and like they
that's right. Yeah,
So yeah, absolutely. Everything it depends on limb length, height. For example, I'll give you one example. So for one
yeah,
year, I tried to lift like Sage Bergner. Tried to
yeah,
do it the exact same way. We're playing around with it. But if you look at Sage and I next to each other, I think we're roughly the same height. She's a little bit taller, but she's
yeah,
like 80% legs and I'm 50%. I'm basically 50-50.
yeah,
So wherever the bar lands on me and how all it works out with my limb lengths and everything, it's going to be very different. Trying
yeah,
to lift like her was awful. Trying to create the same shapes as her did not work very well for me. And a year into it, I showed her a video of me lifting. I go, "What do you think of this?" And she's like, "Oh, that looks great." I'm like, "Okay." She's like, "Go back to that." I'm like, "All right." And if you think about it, like a barbell, to force someone into a one size fits all situation with a barbell is wrong,
Yeah.
because I mean, if you were to put me next to that 6'2" guy, the
Right.
bar would land in a very different place on on my tibia than it would on his.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
him, it's like not even it's not even go higher than his crew socks if he was wearing crew socks.
Yeah.
The entire all the mechanics of it are very different.
Yeah.
If you wanted to make it even, you would elevate the weight up on blocks or something so that we can create
Right.
the same shape. Because of the
Yeah.
size of the plate that's standard, it's standardized. You can't, I mean, the thing that's standardized is the weight plate. You can't standardize the position.
Right.
And that's something that I've been working with people a lot lately is what it looks like really doesn't matter. It's what it feels like. For
Right.
him, where do you create the most mechanical advantage? He's probably going to have his butt high. It might
Yeah.
not. It might even be parallel with his shoulders if he's got
Yeah.
really long legs, and that's
Right.
completely correct for him. There's no
Yeah.
such thing as a one size fits all on the way it's supposed to look,
Yeah.
because what's standardized is equipment, not the body type.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
barbell in particular is one of those things that I've been shying away from for a lot of people, because we've been using the barbell in CrossFit because it's convenient. It's an easy way to standardize the amount of weight that people are using. But the caveat there is that you're
Right.
forcing people into positions and shapes that they might not be ideal for. Like if their body type is six
Yeah.
foot two, legs that are like 80% of their body, they're not going to get into that normal shape that it looks like. In fact,
Right.
for the first 3 years of coaching the deadlift, I hated it because I understood from the beginning that it depends. Like
Yeah.
my cousin's wife, she's her proportions, she was basically parallel. Shoulders and hips are parallel to each
Right.
other because her legs were really long and that's just the way she was built. And it freaked me out at first because
Yeah.
it was just, no, I need to have a one size fits all so that I can teach this movement. But no, like coaching is
Yes.
depends. It's always it
Yeah.
depends. And
Yes.
that gives people anxiety. Like I get people that I
Yeah.
coach that just freak out because they don't, it forces them to think for themselves and to try things and to experiment.
Yeah.
Whereas they would prefer things to be black and white. And coaching is not that way.
Yeah. Yeah. It was another a coach who's done at L1, and as I'm growing and learning more, I mean, once you have a little bit of knowledge, it's like, here's the standard. This is it. And I was talking to a PT the other day, even about my squat, and I'm like, man, it kind of hurts to have shoulder width and pressing knees way out,
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, it's a PT that comes to our gym, and he's like, oh, well, why don't you? Where does it feel comfortable? And so I went between hip and shoulder width and toes a little bit out, but way more forward. And I'm like, that feels good. I can still get below parallel, but I don't have weird like hip impingement feeling. And, and he's like, yeah, just there are standards for beginners that you kind of like, so let's start here and see how it works. But then you can move around depending on
Yes.
that person. So I believe that, but I just wanted to hear from someone who has a lot more experience. If I'm moving in the right direction, thinking that way, and anybody else watching can maybe start adjusting. Once you move past the beginner stage of an athlete who's a beginner,
Mm-hmm.
then you can start. Hey, let's try some different positions. How does that feel? So
Absolutely, yes.
yeah,
In fact, I used to work for Teresa Larson, who's a physical therapist. And one of the things that
right,
we were working with was the idea that people's bone structure in the hip, so pretend like this is their femur, the socket
yep,
at the top, sometimes the structure is such that squatting below parallel with the perfect shape is not going to be even possible for somebody because
right,
they don't have the
yeah,
anatomy to squat that way. So forcing everyone into what it's supposed to look like is incorrect. Even at the
yeah,
level one, we deliberately simplify the things for you as a general
sure,
rule, and then it's your
yes,
responsibility to learn and to modify per person.
right,
We teach the deadlift and the snatch and the clean in the level one to have the same starting position. And we do that
right,
with the intent of keeping it simple for beginning coaches. However,
yes,
if you go to actual Olympic weightlifting, we don't teach you to crowd the bar with your shins. We teach you to
mm,
be further away so you have more shin angle. And I think the
yeah,
problem is that there are too many people who go to the level one and they think the level one is the end all, and they don't realize that there's more specificity for specific
right,
movements. Like we're teaching you as
yeah,
generalists, like having vertical chain in the snatch and the clean, it will work, but it's not going to be the most advantageous way to lift that barbell. The best way is
Right.
usually to have a little more angle and having more of a direct straight push down on the floor versus this, hey, send your knees back, bring your butt back, and
Yep.
all of a sudden you're all on your heels and
Yep.
you're like not even on your full foot anymore.
Right.
Deliberately simplify it at the level one so that we don't overwhelm you, but
Yes.
it's really just the start. It's this is some groundwork to start with. Start with shoulder width or hip width. And for
Yep.
some people, if you look at elite weightlifters, like we show the 2008 110 plus, the super heavyweight class of the weightlifting
Yep.
competitions for the Olympics. And there are
Yep.
guys who are starting their start position on the snatch with enormously wide stance because they have to accommodate things like a big old belly, you know? And for some
Yeah.
people, that's a reality. Like some people will never squat below parallel, especially if they're larger, if their
Yeah.
hips and their calves are huge, like really big calves and hamstrings. They're not going
Yes.
to be able to get below parallel. They physically can't unless they go crazy wide to give their hips space.
Yeah.
And now you're breaking the shoulder width apart rule.
Yeah.
So it really is a game. No matter what you're doing in athletics, is you're gonna have to modify for the person on a person to person basis, and
Sure.
context is everything. Like
Yeah.
heels down is an okay cue if their
Yep.
toes are floating off the ground, or they're sorry, if they're completely on their toes and their heels are floating off the floor. But if you're telling
Yes.
someone heels down and now their toes are coming off the ground, that's not correct because we don't want that. We
Yeah.
want a full foot. So you have
Right.
to understand the context of the cue and what it's for and why it's there. And
Yeah.
you mentioned the knees out thing. I
Right.
don't teach knees out anymore at all. For me, I mean, knees out is a great place to start for a beginner because we don't want the knees to cave in. That's bad,
Right.
right? We
Yes.
want the knees and toes to point the same direction.
Yeah.
However, if you're always asking for knees out, I always use this photo as an example because you probably had people teach you that you should drive your knees out on the squat all the time.
Yes.
And I used to do that too. And then one summer I completely screwed up my hips and I had to use a voodoo band to tie my hips together every time I squatted. It was
Yeah. My whole PT experience was they were worried I had a labrum tear in my hip
ah
from creating so much wide and my hip's not made to do that. And I just rubbing the labrum in my hip. And so then we started talking about positioning, and he's like, dude, you shouldn't be squatting that wide.
yeah.
I'm like, well,
Yeah.
that's all I ever heard is knees out, knees out, knees out.
Yeah. Well, if you look at this graphic here, okay, if you look at
And,
the muscle that's used in knees out, it's this glute med right here. It's this teeny tiny muscle here. Okay,
yep.
that muscle is small compared to your glutes and your hamstrings. Yes.
Yeah.
So when I teach the squat now, what I teach people to do is instead of falling into the floor, I tell them to actually bend their legs using their hamstrings. So pull
Kind of
yourself
pull,
down.
kind of pull themselves down.
Yeah, or pull the floor up.
Right.
So what you're
Good.
doing is you're actually creating tension on this big muscle so that this tiny muscle doesn't have to do all of the work.
Yeah.
And once I start squatting that way, this doesn't hurt anymore. My groin doesn't hurt anymore. None of that hurts anymore. And you feel a whole lot more stable. So the mechanics of it, and if you think of where the knees out cue came from as far as spreading the floor,
Yep.
I'm pretty sure that that came from like the West Side barbell side of lifting where they tend to squat super wide stance,
Yep.
where it does make sense to use all of this red musculature.
Yeah.
So I've been studying with the StrongFit guys for the last 2 years, and they've broken down the
Yeah.
body into the external torque chain and the internal torque chain. So the yellow muscles are
Yep.
your explosive muscles. They're short time under tension. They're for explosion and doing things fast. The yellow muscles
Yeah.
are your stabilizer muscles. Most CrossFitters that I've worked with are terribly underdeveloped on the yellow side of their body, but they use a lot of
Yes.
the reds, and these are the muscles that they tend to foam roll the most because they're unbalanced. So
Mm.
if you have people who walk into the gym and they foam roll, it's normally these red muscles that they're foam rolling, right? It's like the side of their
100%.
butt, there's back of the shoulder, their
Yeah.
traps, their lats, the low back, all this stuff here. But
Yep.
effectively, what they're doing is when you foam roll, you're shutting the muscles off.
Sure.
Versus if you're overactive here, why not turn the yellow muscles on instead of shutting the red ones off? It makes
Yeah.
more sense to do this, right? So that's
Yes.
what I spend most of my time doing these days when I coach the squat is, hey, instead of using this teeny tiny muscle right here to do everything, do the down part with this part,
Yep.
do half of the up with this part, and then finish with this part.
Yeah.
Because for most people, the problem, the reason why the knees dive in is that they're trying to use this muscle to stabilize the system when it's not its job to do that. And by the time you get to the part of the squat where it's turn to do its job, it has got nothing left. It's done.
Mm. Yeah.
So if you distribute the load to these ones on the way down and then on halfway up, then you have some capacity for this at the end.
Nice.
And if you teach people to squat that way, you never have to say knees out again because the knees never dive in.
Yeah.
The knees dive in because the body's looking for tension.
Yeah.
I use this analogy basically in every single Q&Ray call I've done so far. I use this analogy. Make a bicep.
Well, I don't want to show mine because yours is so no. Okay.
You get the idea.
Okay.
You can feel the
Yep.
bicep it's on, right?
Yep.
Okay, now straighten your arm. Can you still flex the bicep?
Yeah.
Is it as strong?
Little.
Is it
No
as
way.
strong of a connection?
Yeah.
No, is it as strong as here? Is this stronger? Do you feel more
Yeah.
tension
For
here?
sure, stronger here than here.
Right.
Feels like it.
And the way that works is that the shorter the muscle, the easier it is to create a contraction. The longer that you stretch the muscle, the harder it is to create that contraction unless you develop the mobility to do it.
Right.
When people squat, for example, one of the reasons why their butt tucks underneath in the butt
Yes.
week is that
Yep.
glutes, the glute max, this muscle here, this big meaty muscle right here,
Yep.
it has a certain level of mobility to it. And when I say mobility, what I mean is its ability to stay it connected through range of motion.
Okay.
So if you stand up right now, squeeze your butt cheeks together.
Let me. There we go. All right. I'm
So
up.
you feel your butt cheeks? They're on.
Yes.
Now bend
Yes.
over slightly forward.
Oh, changes a bit.
How so?
Uh, yeah, it feels like, I mean, it goes more out. For me, it feels like I lessen on like the inside big part and goes more toward the
Outside.
out. Yep.
So basically, what you've told me is you've lost a little bit of connection with that glute max
Yeah,
when you start to bend
for
over.
sure.
So
Yep.
what that means is when the muscle gets longer, when you bend over, when you create hip flexion,
Yep.
the glute is stretching. It's the same thing that happened here. When your arm was here, you could still connect with the bicep, but not as strong as when you were here.
Yeah.
Same thing is true when you squat. If you're standing up tall, you can squeeze your butt cheeks together. You can feel your butt. As soon as
Yeah.
you start to bend at the waist a little bit,
Yeah.
the glute is lengthening, and now
Yep.
you can connect with it. So a lot of times, what happens? This happens at about midway down on the squat. Is the glute now has no capacity to contract anymore because it's past its range of motion. So
Yep.
now something else has to shorten to create tension. And you'll see this a lot in front squats. You see people when they get heavy, they do this, they crunch forward.
Uh-huh.
I
Yeah.
used to think it was their upper back that was weak, but it's actually here. It's the obliques and the lower abs that are weak. So the glute's no longer stabilizing the squat anymore. So something has to pick up the slack. So this shortens to create tension so you don't keel over and die. But what that does is it brings the bar forward. So basically what we're seeing there is people are compensating and creating another shape in order to stay tight. When the
Mhm.
knees dive in the squat, it's because there was no tension, or maybe there's not as much capacity on the inside part of the leg here. So what has to happen is the muscle needs to shorten to finally find tension, and that's why the knees dive in. Does that make sense? So if
Yeah.
so here it's basically asking it to contract like here, but it's like I can't do that, so I have to shorten to find that same
Yeah.
tension. You get the same problem when people go overhead. You ever see people where they can't straighten their elbows?
Oh yeah.
It's because they're not strong enough here or here to lock out. So this is
Yep.
having to create tension, and in order to do that, it has to shorten.
Mm.
So basically, if you can help people develop on the squat, if they can develop this inside head of the hammy, we call it the semimembranosus, this part of the
Yep.
hamstring. If you can make that strong and focus on that when people squat, the knees will never dive in again, and you'll never have to say knees out. It's crazy. Like I've worked with people who are just so collapsed in their ankles and they can't squat to save their life. And I taught them, I know this sounds weird, but pretend like you've got a medicine ball between your feet and you're trying to pull it up towards your butt.
Yeah.
And squat like that. Pull yourself down. And sure enough, when they go down, the knees don't cave in. I go, look at your knees, and they're like, that's weird. And I go,
Yeah.
I know, right? It's
Yeah.
backwards. You're thinking because you're always thinking spread the floor, spread the floor. And we did the
Right.
exact opposite. We pulled things together towards the middle, and then the knees don't cave in. If you use the hamstring to bend the knee, so if my leg's straight here, if I bend my knee like that, my
Yep.
knee and my toe are always going to point the same direction because I'm using my hamstring. So you'll never have to say knees out again. It's crazy. And I've seen
Beautiful.
this work with lots and lots of people. But the trouble is that not everyone is as keen to learning those kinds of things. They don't have the patience for it. And so
Yeah,
for those people, I will say knees out. And it tends to
sure.
be the people who don't really care how the sausage is made. They just want to sweat. And
Yep.
in that case, they're not really going to lift that heavy anyway to a point where they're
Yeah.
going to really destroy themselves. Like for me, I was squatting, like, squatting during that time. I was squatting regularly 360 to 380 multiple times a week. So
Wow.
lots of load on my hips. And because I was using that tiny muscle on the side of my hip, it started to get mad. And then my groin was getting mad. But
Yeah.
once I learned how to use my hamstrings, I never had that problem again.
Wow.
So, but I'm a different type of athlete, right? I'm
Right.
actually trying to lift heavy, whereas other people just cure the sweat. So
Right.
in that case, for someone who's like that and doesn't care, doesn't want to learn, I'll say knees out all day long because it's
Sure.
simple. It keeps them safe. It keeps them from shearing their knee in a direction it's not meant to go, but
Yeah.
they're not necessarily putting the type of intensity that's going to force them or that's going to tax them bad enough, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. For someone who
Yes.
is like a serious athlete, then those people are going to be more willing to learn anyway. Usually, the good ones will. They'll be willing to learn and
Yeah.
want to learn, or they
Right.
might just have the raw strength and capacity to get to that. Um, you know what I mean? So they're less
Yes.
likely to wreck themselves.
Yeah.
But like for me, like I was doing that the push the floor part the entire time, and I wrecked myself really bad.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Same. I'm starting to feel it. Since you mentioned, I literally, like, while we're talking, I'm like, man, my piriformis and my all that's like so tight and it's always sore, and I'm like, but it's from that push the floor part, or
it's just
knees wide and all that. So I'm
yeah,
like,
it's
ooh,
not wrong. It's the context, and basically I've been seeing people the people that I've been doing assessments on and I've been working with people, they tend to be very one sided. They're only red muscles, which means half of their body is being underutilized.
yep,
And interestingly enough, if you remember the gymnastics seminar, so what did Elaine say that blew people's minds? She said, a pull up, a muscle up is not a pull, it's a press.
right,
We're pressing down.
yeah,
If you interestingly enough, if you look at all the muscles that gymnasts are good at, it's the yellow muscles.
yeah,
If you press down on the apparatus, you're using your pecs, your teres, short-headed bicep. That's
yep,
pressing down on it, not pulling.
right,
If you remember how she said we were talking about this when you do your toes to bar, don't lift your head up.
yeah,
Well, the reason for that is when you do that, you're switching to the red muscles, which makes it really hard to pull. But if you stay
right,
out, so there's an interesting thing. If you can move in such a way that uses all the same color at the same time, it's more effective.
mm,
So when you look at the like it's say like a toaster bar, it's all yellows. You're
right,
pressing down. You keep your chin down because it keeps you all in yellows. You're using your psoas to flex your hip. You're using your pecs and your teres to press down on the apparatus. That keeps you more congruent with all those muscles.
yeah,
And the deadlift is the same too. If you do the deadlift correctly, it's all yellows.
mm,
If you start to feel this, so I learned uh, I've been doing CrossFit since 2007. I learned in 2018 that I've been using my low back for everything. And like,
yes,
but I got really good at creating the shape and looking the part and being in the right
right,
position because I could fake it. I could make the position look like everyone wants it to look like. But I wasn't creating the correct tension with the muscles that I was supposed to be using. When I
right,
learned how to finally use my glutes, my back doesn't hurt anymore. I
yeah,
get so many people in the gym who have like low back pain, and the reason for that is because they use pretty much just this and this for everything, and the outside of their
yeah,
quad. Do you ever see
yep,
people when they do their cleans or snatches that they roll off into their heel and the outside edge of their foot?
yes,
You ever notice
all
that
the
with the
time,
big toes off the ground?
yep,
Basically, what that tells me is that now they're all reds. They're all in
yep,
reds. But if you can
yeah,
keep this part engaged, this yellow part engaged, the foot will stay flat.
yeah,
Crazy, right? There's and also like if you
yep,
think about like turning on this part, the teres major and the pec, that is actually how we keep the bar
yep,
close to the body. When
yes.
people are weak at that, what do?
I've
They
been
grab their
talking,
elbows.
yeah, I've been talking about people trying, pulling the bar in per
Yeah,
se, trying to get them to understand the use the lats on clean snatches pulling from the floor. That way you can, one, keep the bar in as you're moving up. It doesn't, but it also gets all these big muscles,
Yes.
the proper ones turned on, so that you're not, using all these tiny
Yeah.
little stabilizers like
So
that. So
here's my favorite way to teach that now. Take your hands and put them on the sides of your body, like this, on the side of your thighs.
yeah,
Now
I'm gonna sit up a little bit.
yeah, you can
All
stand
right.
up and put them on your sides.
Hey.
So like this. So you see my hands are here on my hips.
Yep.
Now
Yep.
squeeze in.
Yep.
What do you feel turn on?
Back here.
Do you feel this at all?
I'm doing. Yeah. Here.
Yeah, so here and here, right? So under here.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
my favorite cue now for the snatch, clean, deadlift. When you sit up, pull your hands towards each other,
Mm.
and that will
Yeah.
set your pecs and all that on. The problem that you see people do this is they'll do this arch like that,
Yeah.
and now look at my back. What's my back doing?
Yeah.
Instead, I want you to do
Wrong.
this,
Yeah.
not this, but this.
Ah. So good.
So little things like that. So when I teach the deadlift too, what I teach people is I want you to pretend like you're pulling the floor together, but don't let your knees cave in. So create the
Yeah.
position of external rotation, but now create torque on the inside of the leg to keep that stable.
Nice.
And it's like, so the deadlift, if you think about it, the deadlift is only really efficient if you can keep everything close to you, right?
Right.
Interestingly enough, all of the yellow muscles here, their role is to keep everything close to you. That's the job of all these yellow muscles. Keep everything centered to the body. So if you teach people how to turn all these on when they do the deadlift, they're going to be a whole lot more effective.
Awesome.
And then going back to the 6'2" lifter, with the shape that he's
Yeah.
going to create when he turns all this stuff on, his butt will definitely be higher than what is picture perfect.
Right.
So I always say
Yeah.
tension's more important than position. If you create the correct tension, you will create the correct position
Mm.
for the person. If you're just creating position, now you have opportunity to compensate and do things that your body wasn't meant to do. For me, I was using low back for everything because I was trying to create a position, versus now I connect with the correct tension and then my body does the position that's optimal for me. And now I'm pain free and now I can move more weight and now I can
Yeah.
not hurt, which is
Yeah.
the goal anyway, right? We want to come back to
Yes.
the gym. So
Yeah.
tension over position is what we say.
Tension over position.
Yeah,
I like
tension is
that.
more important than position. If you create, so here's another example, right? You see people overhead, they do this, right? Like a lot of times you see them overhead, they're kind of shrugging and doing this.
Yes.
So we'll say, hey, turn this way,
Yep.
right? Now, if I flex the
Right.
bicep, watch what happens. If I just focus, what happened to my shoulder when I flex the bicep?
Yeah.
What happened?
Rotate it out.
It turned. You try
Yep.
it. You try it. So flex the bicep. So you notice when you flex the bicep, it turns the shoulder. And what else turns on? What other muscle turns on? What do you feel?
Well,
Your lat.
yep.
Weird,
I
right?
like. Yep.
So the way we teach this is we don't teach individual muscles really anymore. They're chains. Because when I told you to turn this one on, what happened?
Yep.
This turned on too, right?
Yep.
They come together. They're friends. So when you do this, it turns on this and this. When you
Yep.
turn on this, it turns on this and it turns on this. When
Yep.
you bring your head down, it keeps everything locked into here. So it's interesting. Like we teach them as chains and not as individual muscles. So turn on the yellows. So
Right.
that means like this. So now I'm on here.
Yeah.
If I want to do all the reds, it's gonna be more like this.
Right.
You think of it as a systemic thing. So it's a different way to look at the body, and it's been really, really awesome for me as a coach to do this and to teach people this stuff. And then
Yeah.
they're able to correct like shoulder pain, back pain, hip pain,
Yeah.
knee pain. A lot of times people feel knee pain in the squat because they're using too much of the quad,
Yeah.
and not enough of the hamstring. Um, have you ever seen people where they're always in their toes?
Yes.
A lot of the times it's because their hamstring doesn't work. So
Yeah.
I had a guy who was doing the bear complex one time and he was just in his toes on everything. And I was like, hey, do you want to try something? It's really stupid. He's like, okay, sure. So I had him go over to the rig with a band, put the band on the ground, and do hamstring curls with the band. He went back to his bear complex, and his heels stayed on the floor. The other coach was in the back. He looks, he's like, what? How did that work? And I'm like, well, his hamstring isn't on, so his quads and his calves have to compensate. They have to do something. And for them, the most advantageous position for them is to be on the toes.
Hmm.
But as soon as I turn his hamstring on, his hamstring can now contribute to the load. So now his feet are going to be flat and everything else look better. I'm so tired of there's companies out there that say you don't need to learn how to find your muscles. That's crap. All they're trying to do is sell you programming. You know,
Yeah.
if you teach someone how to connect to a muscle, they're gonna know what a movement's supposed to feel like and do it correctly.
Right.
Like my goal as a coach is not to get you dependent on me for programming or dependent on me to
Right.
look at what you're doing. I want you to be able to have the awareness to feel what it's supposed to look like or to feel what it's supposed to feel like, and then it's gonna look like it's supposed to look like too.
Yeah.
Versus, hey, make it look a certain way, and then do it however. Because especially people who are very athletic, they're gonna figure out how to create a shape, even
Sure.
if they're doing it wrong. They're gonna compensate somehow.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you teach someone how to connect with their body, the movement's gonna fix itself. And that's a totally different philosophy of coaching. Like we've been so used to like, hey, like turn here, push your knees out, like as you play around with the squat thing I was talking about, get people to learn how to pull the floor to them, and their knees won't dive in.
Yeah.
They might a little bit, but it's just going to be up to the point where they have to keep practicing it. When they get tired, it will start to fatigue, and they'll default to what they know is
Yeah.
more normal. But I've got guys I've been working with for the last couple of years, and I've been just teaching them pull the floor up. The knee doesn't dive in anymore. Maybe a tiny
Hmm.
bit, but it's not as egregious as it used to be. The feet stay
Yeah.
flat, their back stays flat, they've got no pain. It's pretty cool.
I'm gonna go and try it today later on with
Yeah, play around.
myself.
Yeah, let me know how it
Yeah.
goes. Send me a message on Instagram. I always say
Yeah.
this whenever I do a Q&A. I say, hey, do the thing, video it, and send it to me, and I will look at it. No one takes me
Okay.
up on it. It's like crazy. I'm like, I'm giving you free time. Let's just send me the thing, and I will look at it.
I'm gonna. You're gonna see it. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna. I coach at 12:30. It's 11:15. I'm gonna go back today, and I'm going to video myself just doing some air squats and feel the difference of trying to pull the floor up instead of spread the floor apart.
Cool. Do it the first time your regular way and video it, and then do a
Okay?
second time trying it the new way, and then tell me what you see and what you feel.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It'll be interesting because I have been like this. My hip has definitely got something going on right now, so I will definitely be able to feel a difference if I'm using the different muscles. It should feel instantly like, oh,
Hopefully.
oh, I'm not feeling funky there right now.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
yeah,
Awesome, Christian. I think we're out of time. That went really fast.
yeah, it's okay. Well, we can talk about the other stuff next time.
Sounds good. Take care, man.
Yeah. All
All right.
right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.